Greetings and welcome to the San Mage experiment. I decided to go a little bit earlier tonight. Hey, Gerald Yates, how's it going, man? I was going to do my normal Tuesday morning, afternoon kind of thing, but been in the house all night, had a couple of glasses of wine, and just thought that, why should I deprive you guys of the genius of me? So I'll start with a little bit of music, and then I'm going to give a very, very important talk on whatever the title was. Mind space, the astral plane, demons, angels, and psychedelics. Damn, I had hoped to keep that music going because I just realized that my script for tonight. Hey, Nine Eland. Did I see Nine Eland there? No, maybe I didn't. Hey, Brandon Young, Gerald Yates, Philip Blair, Nine Eland. Yeah, there you are. Oh, sorry, if anyone was a moderator and they aren't now, it's because I had to seriously rethink a few things about my channel. Brandon, you will be reinstated right away. Add moderator, as will Philip Blair. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of had to, well, for personal reasons. So, now it goes back to the music. So let me just play the music for a bit, and then I'm going to try and get up my. So I've actually been writing. Can you hear me okay, by the way, above the music? So I've been trying to write like proper essays. Here we go. So, this episode is called Mindspace, the Astral Plane, Angels, Demons, and Psychedelics. See, I can't even really look at chat. Oh, God. I really need to get this shit sorted. So, has everybody maybe turned down the music a bit, you mean? Yeah? Is that better? So you can hear my voice and perhaps a little bit of background music, which is cool. Nice to see you again, Nine Eland. I'm actually really quite worried about Prospero. Remember Prospero that used to turn up to like every stream and he used to send me emails and stuff? It was him that sent me, was it him that sent me Eliphas Levi, Transcendental Magic? And no, I just haven't heard from him for ages. So with these COVID-19 times and stuff, I was just a little bit concerned. So I'm going to read what I've written here. So, in this episode, I'm continuing to explore the themes I've covered in my previous 3 or 4 streams. I've had a bit of a conversion, in a way, to the from moving purely from the psychological model to the spirit model, basically. First, I want to clarify for myself what occultists mean when they speak of the astral plane. Then I'll go on to discuss the densians of this weird and occasionally terrifying space. I'll be using ideas put forth in the books Psychedelics Shamanism by Jim DeCorn and my current favourite Secrets of the Magical Grimoires by Aaron Leach, with some Robert Anton Wilson and Crowley thrown in. So I think it's no secret by now, if you've watched this channel for a while, that I came across the idea of a mysterious realm where mythic beasts and figures roam in a book called Magic, an Occult Primer by David Conway. I found it in my school library in first year when I was about 12 and was immediately fascinated by its description of the astral plane. As a child, I'd fantasized about finding a secret door to a cartoonish parallel universe, my own Narnia or Oz. I'll just figure out a way that I can actually see me and chat. Whoa. So if I just move that over a little bit, or move the whole thing. Oh my god, aren't computers a fucking head fuck? Well, there I am. There's live chat. So how do I get live chat? And there seems to be no way that I can watch live chat while I'm reading out this stuff. There must be some way. Why don't I just quit the music and read it on my phone? That would be the most sensible thing. Okay, so we can do away with that and even do away with that. And then we've got glorious me. Yes. So now I can actually see what you're saying. I know that CW Chanter is doing a stream, by the way, so you guys are hardcore Saroth fans. So yeah, as a child, I'd fantasized about finding a secret door to a cartoonish parallel universe, my own Narnia or Oz, you know. There was actually a film, Jamie in the Toll Booth, which I was absolutely obsessed with as a child. It just had that, you know, when something really touches you as a child, and I don't mean your uncle. 2 or 3 years later, I would find myself in that landscape by accident. A group of friends and I gathered magic mushrooms on the school football pitches on a wet autumn afternoon. I don't know who gave us the idea or what we expected them to do. I remember the earthy taste and slimy texture of the raw mushrooms as we consumed them without finesse. I must have eaten I've written here, 30 or 40 whole psilocybin mushrooms. And these are like Scottish mushrooms. They're not cubensis. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but they're small. They're not particularly, well, they are powerful, but 30 or 40 is not a huge dose. You know, that would be equivalent to maybe 1 or 2 dried grams. My group of 5 or 6 adventurous pals wandered down to our favourite hangout, a large park in our neighbourhood called the Duthie Park. To keep this short, after an hour or so, I felt increasingly strange. In the September twilight, colours began to intensify, and the grass, trees, and bushes all around me began to glow and radiate presence from within. I wandered away from my giggling schoolmates and sat facing one of the largest trees in the park. I sensed the energy emanating from it. I even imagined it was communicating with me in a slow vegetable language. Everything around me shimmered and vibrated with life. My thoughts became profound, and my normal entire fuck's sake, this is hard. My normal entire internal dialogue became, for the child I was, mystical. It felt like I'd temporarily become elect, a prophet, or a genius. I told myself I'd found the Garden of Eden and things would never be the same again, and they weren't. So, moving to the present day and my attempt to intellectually understand the occult world of higher dimensions and spirits, be they gods, goddesses, angels, demons, daemons, elementals, extraterrestrials, etc. I want to know not only what they are, but how I can work with them to satisfy my curiosity and enrich my life in a magical way. Let's start with where and what the place I called the Garden of Eden was. It was the Duthie Park. My physical location hadn't changed. I wasn't lifted bodily into heaven, although that's probably how it would be described in religious literature of the past, and this is one of my major points. So the answer must be that I'd accessed something that was inside me all along. Jim DeCorner, the author of Psychedelic Shamanism, would call this mind space, an inner dimension that shamans, magicians, and visionaries have visited and described since the beginning of our ability to time bind, which means to write things down in language and to pass them through the generation. This generation. I'm pretty certain that all religion, mythology, and spirituality, indeed anything humans regard as holy or sacred, come from contact with this mind space and its inhabitants. I believe the most infallible method of reaching it is by the use of plants and fungi known as entheogens, psychedelics, hallucinogens, plant teachers, etc. But other methods include prayer, fasting, meditation, gazing, yoga, and of course, ritual magic. And more recently, dream machines and flotation tanks, and cut-ups and all that kind of stuff. In fact, all the techniques of occultism get you there to a greater or lesser degree. It's my aim on this blog channel, whatever this is, it's a YouTube channel, I believe, to try and show the unity of purpose behind everything from Stone Age shamanism, Greek mystery schools, medieval grimoires, Golden Dawn and Thelema, chaos magic, the human potential movement, and even some New Age modalities. Although I do find New Ageism to be the most confused and muddied pool. Maybe that's because it's so new, and I don't know. There's actually a good graph at the start of Liber Null and Psychonaut by Pete Carroll, which shows a very similar progression of traditions. You know, shamanism to Gnosticism to blah. Yeah, there. I just described it. And it also goes into different methods of achieving gnosis, which are exactly the ways to enter the astral plane without the use of drugs. Shamanism has always proposed the existence of at least three worlds. The middle world is the everyday world, circuits 1 to 4 using the Leary-Wilson model. The upper world is the celestial world of God, the sun, good spirits, angels, etc. The The lower world is the land of the dead, demons and dangerous spirits, known as the infernal chthonic world. And I'd say both of these latter worlds would be covered in circuits 4 to 8 of the Leary-Wilson model. For the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to draw a sharp line between shamans and other psychic travelers like magicians, mystics, Kabbalists, and psychonauts, because the ideas and terminologies overlap so much. Cornelius Agrippa, in his 3 books of occult philosophy, which was written way back 500 years ago, also posits 3 worlds. He calls them the elementary, celestial, and intellectual. In the Kabbalah, we find 4 worlds: Asaya, Yetzirah, Bria, and Azaluth. Divisions are somewhat arbitrary because of a very important point. These worlds are subjective in that they are not directly perceivable to our ordinary senses. When we travel into our own interior worlds, there are no concise boundaries, meaning between the first and the second, the third and the fourth. It's just only gradual changes of terrain. This doesn't invalidate them, but it does make them very difficult to visualize if you haven't been there. They do not exist out there, somewhere in the physical universe, but are contained within our own psyches. We are the vessels, brazen vessels, containing infinite intelligences, heavens, and hells. By definition, a higher dimension would be invisible to us in our everyday level of consciousness. Of course, on Earth, we have like 3 dimensions of space: length, breadth, and height, and 1 of time, which we call the space-time continuum. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff that I could have added in here about the Niels Bohr Copenhagen interpretation and all that, but, that's beyond the scope of this podcast. But because we cannot separate our subjective experience of time from our experience of so-called objective reality within time, if you get me, Ducorna suggests the term space mind instead of space time. You know what I mean? Because everything is, there is no real object reality that is not processed through. I think I'll go into this next. So he describes space mind as: space mind describes the experience of our subjective consciousness immersed in a 3-dimensional world. But this is far from our only reality. The 0-dimensional point of consciousness, when focused inward, perceives another region, which I submit is best described by the term mind space. See what he's done there? Space mind, mind space. Clever. A distorted mirror image of space mind. Space mind and mind space are, back to back, the 2 infinities confronted by consciousness. So this is me again. Scientific materialism fails to describe the interior imaginal world because we cannot stand outside our own reality in order to measure it. You cannot understand a system when you're inside of it because you're part of the system. To again quote the author of Psychedelic Shamanism, it is easy to comprehend a point, line, plane, and cube. Indeed, any child can readily discern spatial dimensions below 3. But even mystics get confused when trying to describe 4-dimensional space. And I absolutely agree with that. This is me again. In the work of Carl Gustav Jung, we find the concept of the collective unconscious. And in the work of Austin Osman Spare, we encounter the idea of Kia, which suggests we, as individual perceiving subjects, are able to tap into a larger group mind where powerful psychic forces meet racial or cultural archetypes. I suggest if we go deeper into this realm, we encounter independent beings who are not simply parts of our subconscious minds, but exist as higher dimensional entities who can work with us or against us. Hey, Stephen Ronan, how's it going, man? So what do you think of that so far? Is it making any sense, or does it just sound like I'm reading off a bunch of bullshit? So it's been really, I think I don't want to, this is why I always do, I do notes and then I jump the gun when I start the stream by going through all the points, but kind of skipping over them. So I'll just continue. I mean, maybe it's not very hard to follow. I think this is where I'm going, people. Definitely writing more. And I think it has got something to do with me going into the practicus grade of the Golden Dawn. Theodicus is an air grade, so everything was kind of swirling around, not making much sense. But the guy that wrote the manual, which I'm following, said that as soon as you get into practicus, you'll start to put your ideas into practice. Funnily enough, practice. And I do seem to, since I started doing the invocation of the 4 powers of water and doing the invocations of Mercury and Jupiter, although I haven't actually done any planet. No, I haven't. I'm lying. I've thought about them, which kind of is the same thing sometimes astrally. Okay, let's get back to the story. So De Corner calls the inner occulted world mind space because we are always at the center of our own perceptual universes. We filter everything through our own sense organs and nervous systems. Robert Anton Wilson would call this our reality tunnel, and the Wilson-Leary 8-circuit model is something I'll be returning to again and again as I explore maps of consciousness and alternate realities. How can spirits, gods, angels, whatever, be inside us and outside us simultaneously? I've often noticed how paradoxes seem to suddenly resolve themselves while under the influence of psychedelics. And this is quite important. And I believe, I could be wrong, I believe this is because they temporarily give us a superposition outside of space and time. No fucking way. Like the invisible forces of gravity and radiation, the spirit world presumably exists when we are not observing it. It's like, does a tree make any sound when it falls in the forest? Yes, I think it does. Of course it does. In fact, the spirit world may well be observing us from that extra spatial dimension. This would explain how a god could appear to be omniscient and omnipotent from our perspective. De Corner asks us to visualize being a two-dimensional. Now this gets a little bit, stick with me here, guys. De Corner asks us to visualize a two-dimensional entity living on one of the faces of a 6-sided cube and states, although it isn't immediately obvious to you, your world is actually tangential to 5 invisible two-dimensional universes similar to your own, each with its unique population of beings. Imagine that turned inside out in 3 dimensions, and you get an intuitive grasp of how we can grasp other realms from within. So his whole thing is saying that these extra dimensions are not outside us somewhere, they're absolutely inside us. The vertical axis is like perhaps the spinal column, the world tree, the middle pillar of the Kabbalah. The author clearly places the astral realms in hyperspace and also notes that our 3-dimensional language concepts struggle to describe the events and qualities of that other inner place. Is this why writings on mystical states of consciousness can be notoriously difficult to understand? Crowley often describes this problem, and this is not the quotation I was looking for, but it's kind of close. You know, when you've how difficult is it to find a exact quotation for a thing that you've remembered? But yeah, so this is kind of close. Nothing, this is Crowley speaking here, nothing is clearer to my mind than the great difficulty habitually experienced by the normal mind and the assimilation of metaphysics is due to the actual lack of experience in the mind of the reader of the phenomena discussed. What he's basically saying is language breaks down when you experience the higher circuits, the higher levels of awareness, which, magic, psilocybin, all that stuff. I've often remarked myself, and I have in these streams, that when on large doses of psilocybin, human language seems utterly inadequate. Ideas are understood in something non-verbal. And this is something that occurred to me. Language is trapped in 3-dimensional time because it unfolds in time. You know what I mean? The time that it took me to speak this sentence is enclosed in the time that it's taken me to say this sentence. So language needs to unfold in linear time to make sense. The closest we get to describing shamanic journeys are metaphors, which are often synesthetic, which means they describe things like it was like tasting fire or hearing color. The reason I've struggled with conceptualizing the idea of real beings in an imaginal space should be self-evident. Where do I stop and they begin? You know, and this is a very common problem with all magicians. You know, you first enter magic through your imagination, but when does that imagination start to join up with the larger imagination of the collective unconscious, Kia, as Austin Osman Spare would call it? And then where does it go into the truly transdimensional realms and consciousness, you know? So are you digging it so far, guys? Is it making any fucking sense? It did when I was writing it, for sure. I think this is definitely the way forward for me. Yeah, colors are very loud. That's exactly a synesthetic concept, you know. Arthur Rimbaud was one of the first that I've ever read to equate poetic forms with synesthesia. What can I say? So I will return to live chat. So yeah, the reason I've struggled with conceptualizing so I've done that bit. So it's like, where do I stop? Okay, magic is at first a lot to do with the imagination. You kind of will yourself into this landscape that you've created it, but there are also entities interacting with you. I would say that taking high doses of a hallucinogenic drug will definitely put you into the place where you will find exterior entities. You know, it's not just imagining. Inner space, yes, Stephen Ronan. Or what this thing is about is I read a book by Jim DeCorner called Psychedelic Shamanism, and he describes it as mind space. And then, Jung, the collective unconscious, Austin Osman Spare, Kia. It's a very, that's where magic resides for me, is in these places that are not the everyday consciousness of human beings. So, where do I stop and they begin? This has really been an important question for me. In my search for answers to that first psilocybin trip and all the weird experiences I've had since, I've continually dismissed evidence of other realities and spiritual creatures because they fail to live up to my ideas of objectivity. This is a very interesting point, I think. I wanted them to be real, in inverted commas, measurable, and able to give me proof of their existence. And this reminds me of a podcast I was listening to with the saint, who is Dr. Stephen Skinner, when he was speaking to Alexander F. from Glitch Bottle. And Alexander F. said, right, in ideal circumstances, if you had a sound studio with ultra, cool state-of-the-art cameras and microphones, and you did an invocation, would you be able to catch that spirit or that magical experience on camera? And Stephen Skinner had to kind of say, well, it just doesn't work like that, which sounds like a massive cop-out. Saint Skinner, yeah. It does sound like a massive... then there is no way to measure them. So I go again, anybody who's watched this channel is probably bored of hearing about my dull visions and experiences. But that first vision, when I was pulled out of my body while receiving Reiki and literally shown planet Earth from space by a group of beings that claimed to be Pleiadians, I rejected it because it just seemed too strange, too fantastic. In the summer of 2018, however, I did a series of psilocybin trips and combined them with fasting, purification and consecration rituals and observances. I visited a friend who has a large house with a room solely dedicated as a temple. I framed the whole experience with banishings and invocations and had an undeniably magical experience where the absolute reality of the shamanic extra dimension impressed itself upon me. For weeks afterwards, I felt what I've heard described as a Kundalini awakening. I had boundless energy. I found a new sense of purpose. I started this YouTube channel and restarted my Golden Dawn grade work. These experiences tie in nicely with the Leary-Wilson 8-circuit model, where 4 antique circuits, which all adult humans have, are gradually opening into the next 4 future circuits, which become more transcendental. The 8th and final circuit being the non-local quantum circuit. I again, right now, stand in a similar place with my sudden realization that those weren't simply hallucinations or phantasms from an overactive imagination, but were part of an ongoing initiation, a journey, or indeed a quest to the astral world. A huge problem for me as a practicing occultist is my abounding skepticism. I see testimony from occultists and spiritual types which seem entirely implausible. And some of the CW chanter crowd will know exactly who I'm talking about here. I would hate to fall into the category of deluded spiritual narcissist who clutter up Facebook groups and YouTube channels with wishful thinking and downright lies about magical abilities and encounters with beings from other worlds. When I started getting serious about ritual magic, and unexpectedly seemed to make contact with beings from my inner planes, I walked away because I wanted proof that I wasn't just imagining these encounters. I wanted the entities to give me proof that they had some knowledge beyond that which I already possessed, because that's surely the acid test of a higher intelligence. But I wanted an equation or piece of amazing information, something that could be Kabbalistically checked, like Crowley's Book of the Law, which I doubt, to be honest. I don't believe in gematria and all that. It's so open to manipulation and bullshit. The being Thosis told me that it could only communicate with the imagery and vocabulary I already had. This, to me, was final proof that I was playing some bizarre game with myself. But I recently read Aaron Leach, who I kind of respect as an authority on grimoire magic, saying that because spirits have no physical bodies, no voice boxes, with which to speak, they do indeed rely on our stock of images and words to communicate. I believe I've been too dismissive of important clues to the reality of the spirit world, and will go forward with much more openness to the spirit model. Because the astral world for me began with a psilocybin experience and continued with a willed or self-created or discovered world, it's been difficult for me to judge what was just imagination and what was coming from a pre-existing spiritual sphere. This can't just be true of me, but my perceived lack of any special psychic talents and a tendency towards laziness have made me feel I'm very far behind some of my magical peers. I mean, people of the same age that have been into the occult for as long as I have. I have had some extraordinary experiences while experimenting with ritual magic, and perhaps it's only in looking back I see that my occult phenomena were more valid than I realized at the time. What I have to figure out right now is how I'm going to proceed. As I've said before, blind faith in a process is not something I'm interested in. I can't devote myself to a system or lengthy working without knowing exactly what I'm trying to do and where it fits into the bigger picture. I refuse to be swept along by faddish ideas of being matey with demons to become a living god. Delusion is strong in the occult community, although there's an equally strong faction whom I admire, who clearly aren't making up and who are entirely sane. It seems by viewing magic as a psychological process, I've missed out on some really interesting leads in the puzzle of human consciousness. And that's what I'm really interested in. Working with spiritual creatures just to gain a better job or some other mundane thing seems trivial. This is one of the reasons that until recently, I've never given much credence to the grimoires with their mind-bogglingly complex instructions for summoning angels and demons. Apart from the overt religiosity and strange, unobtainable ingredients, the roles assigned to these extra-dimensional intelligences seem banal and materialistic, contacting beings who are presumably to us as we are to animals, and asking them to make us invisible or find us buried treasure seems a real waste of an opportunity to learn from these beings. Perhaps they are not to be taken too literally, the grimoires, I mean, in respect to the powers the celestial and infernal intelligences possess. They were written a long time ago, when our understanding of science and technology were riven with superstition and ignorance. As much as I respect traditional magic, I feel that having to turn back to material written literally hundreds of years ago shows how scientism has impoverished our ideas on how to interact with non-physical realities. By using occult technologies and entheogens, we could repair our broken relationship with Mother Earth and the poor, if there are elemental spirits and, undines and sylph and salamanders and gnomes, they must be in despair. And that's as far as I got with that. So, round of applause from me. Thank you very much. So what did you think of that, guys? Did that make any sense, or did it just sound like I was reading out of some boring book? Right. Stephen Ronan, I don't think we can ever catch spirits on camera. No,